Hello, folks. I'm Jason Rader from Insight's Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division, and welcome to today's CDCT live session. Today's session is titled The Future of Multicloud, and I'm really excited to welcome two good friends that are sure to make this a lively session. With me today are Sridhar Vasudevan, Senior Principal, and Peter Kraatz, National Portfolio Director here at CDCT. Sri and Pete, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
That sounded very exciting. So, so we're all really good friends. Yeah, we know how this topic's going to kind of go down the road, but I'm really excited to talk about it with these guys. So, guys, let's kick it off by maybe Sri. What do we mean when we're talking about multi-cloud?
So, in the simplest of definitions, if you have applications and workloads that you're strategizing on where to place, and you have, your on-prem data centers or co-locations that is constructed as a private cloud, meaning you're providing services in a cloud-like manner, and then you have at least one other public cloud service. That would be simple, but there are different definitions that different people think about. For some, it's multiple public clouds along with your, on-prem private clouds. For some, it's a hybrid cloud when you do a private plus a public. So it's very important to understand what is your definition define.
Yeah, so interesting. Sri and I were having this conversation a couple of days ago, and we got into something of an argument. We don't argue much, so this really wasn't an argument so much. It was a philosophical discussion about the nature of what does it mean to be multi-cloud. And I had suggested that there's room to include some of these other services that aren't necessarily Amazon infrastructure services or Microsoft Azure platform services, microservices. I said, what about Dropbox? What about OneDrive? What about iCloud? What about all these other things that tend to intrude upon the margins of IT's responsibilities? And as we were talking about it, we sort of settled in the conversation around, well, most of those really don't count for 90% of the definitions of multi-cloud. Maybe the one area where I think we said that we might agree that intrusion counts, it might be in the realm of some of the core Office apps like Office 365 and OneDrive, and how those need to be integrated with the larger corporate picture. But keep me honest, Sri, am I representing our conversation fairly?
So the differentiation is, are these enterprise services or are these people using cloud in the enterprise context? So the shared IT services still has to be worried about it or have to manage those, cloud services. But at the same time, from an enterprise perspective, how do you define it? Are you only looking at your critical application workloads? Are you looking at, other things? So file services, et cetera. So that's really the direction where we were taking it, right? So you could have something like iCloud that people use, but should you allow that? Is that a cloud? But on the other hand, like you said, there could be file sharing services that is on Box, which is definitely, in the context of a cloud. So you still have to manage and deliver it in the enterprise context, right?
Yes, and I think that's where we settled, right? Was any definition that we want to embrace specific to multi-cloud has got to incorporate, it really need that one linchpin is enterprise. Does it intrude upon enterprise IT, and is it their mandate to manage it, right? In that sense, so we're not really worried about all the outliers. Just to clear that up, I think is really key.
And then while we were talking, we landed upon the fact that sometimes even without us knowing about it, we may be already in a multi-cloud situation, and to recognize that would be appropriate so that you can plan your operations, governance, and other things around management around it.
So that being said, from a business leader perspective, right? It's some folks that I talk to feel like having multiple clouds is it's kind of like a badge of honor for them, where they're thinking, hey, I've got it covered. I'm able to use the best of breed across multiple different platforms, whether they be private cloud or public cloud or somewhere in a hybrid motion. And then some folks that I talk to are like, no, I'm just standardizing on one because it gives me more of this standardization, and therefore you get other things that come with that, like maybe security or consistency and those kinds of things. What do you, I mean, obviously I think that it's going to be somewhere in between for most folks, right?
I think it's a spectrum, right? And I think I'm, Sri and I haven't had this conversation before, but I think I know where his head's at. Well, let's see if we can find an argument to be had here.
So to jump on it, how does a multi-cloud strategy affect the placement of workloads? We talked about application workloads. How does it affect that, right? So are you trying to, or is someone thinking about scaling their applications in multiple clouds, but they're of the same type? Is that the reason, and what's the benefit for it? Or why are you thinking about running the same application workload in 2 different clouds? But sometimes people think about, I need to put my disaster recovery or passive workload or backups in a different cloud, so it gets me a little bit of more robust protection. In other cases, different workloads that are giving a different perspective to you, or your workload requires certain specific needs, you might think about putting on a different cloud than where strategy on what your workloads do, and how do you anticipate getting the benefits of putting in different clouds? Because there's obviously challenges, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, and I think just to talk to you the question directly, because I like what Sri was doing there, because he's talking about the decision that you've got to make really fundamentally resides within the workload placement itself, or what are you going to do with the workloads? What's the best fit for those, performance, cost, functionality, and so forth. But the overarching strategy for multi-cloud implementation, I don't think there's a right answer for everybody. So to your point, right? There's no one, it's bespoke. Your ability to take advantage of multiple providers for similar services is entirely dependent upon how deep your bench is in terms of skills, how large your organization is. There's no point in mom and dad's grocery store with 2 applications and a website worrying about a multi-cloud strategy.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. But there's certainly some benefit to be had for a large organization with more skill sets, more experience to draw from. But again, the litmus test, I think I agree with Sri on, is the workloads. Are the workloads best serviced in one way or the other? I think that's really what's got to drive the decision-making process.
And as we talk to different clients and different people, so there are several things that currently in the marketplace is driving this conversation, right? Some people think that if I can place workloads in different cloud providers, I can better handle peaks in services, right? Peaks that you may have, and I want to scale to different cloud providers to handle that peak. Well, there's a lot of challenges with that strategy. Sometimes you might be worried about, if I put all my eggs in one cloud provider, I may be losing out on cost optimization. Is that really the case? You need to strategize on what does it give you if you not put all your services in one provider, right? There are benefits and certain disadvantages of that.
Well, Sri, I don't mean to cut you off, but you kind of teasing out a concept here that comes up in a lot of our conversations with clients. I've seen 2 papers on it in the last month, and that is that this concept of vendor lock-in that some of our clients are desperately afraid of. I think there's an irrational fear of that particular situation there. I think the argument that I would make on that score is exactly yours, right? Make good decisions based on the workload needs, but also this fear of lock-in, especially as you go further. I'd say maybe down, right, the stack, where you're starting to develop applications that are bespoke to a particular platform, and you're using microservices, and now your code is intimately tied up with Amazon or Azure or Google in some way. And I think that's an irrational fear, because it's a thing that's been with us, since before virtualization. I mean, it's not like you bought a compute or storage array or hyperconverged array, and then look to get rid of it 2 months later for something cheaper. I mean, that you were always locked in one way, shape, or form for some years. In most cases, 3 to 5 years. So I think it's an irrational fear. But I don't know, how would you react to that, Sri?
So when I think about it, I think in terms of lock-in versus lockout, right? So have you evaluated your workloads and understood how they function? Are you ready to take advantage of, say, all the integration points that a single provider provides? So you may be able to take advantage of that. That's a big benefit, right? You miss out if you don't do that. But on the other hand, if you are thinking about best of breed, and you're going to put the best of breed for all requirements within your application portfolio, then that's a good strategy if you have the ability to support that kind of a strategy. The other thing is, when you do have to provide everything as one provider, there are always compromises that you have to make. So you may be missing out on some features that you may require, like I said, specifically for your needs. And if you don't have that, so then you have to think about who provides that need. Or in some cases, I have discussed with people that there's, maybe regional requirements, which is different from, say, in the United States versus EMEA, and then you may be using a different provider in those cases. Again, it all revolves back to, are you really selecting a cloud provider because you understand your workloads, or are you doing it because I want to be protected against some arbitrary price hike that may never happen? As an example.
I think, when I'm thinking about it, as you guys are talking, it sounds like the most important thing about what we talked about is the whole strategy aspect, right? Because I don't think people who ingest different cloud services or whatever to run their apps on, or kind of across the board, and then try to make some sense of it all, that's the opposite of strategy, right? That's more of recovery or dealing with the situation. And it sounds like the main angle to this whole thing, very much focused on the workloads and the types of services that you need, is to not just let your developers develop against a certain platform and then try to figure out how it works with the rest of the stuff, is to have some level of strategy across the business, the way that we want to consume this, and across the way that the organization wants to develop and operationalize across it.
On that thought, Jason, I don't see a lot of this anymore, but I used to see a lot of it in earlier days of public cloud. And thankfully, I don't see a lot of this anymore. And that is the idea of arbitrage as a multi-cloud strategy. It's not a thing. Don't do that. I mean, and what I mean by that, for those listening, is I've had a number of conversations with CIOs who, in larger organizations, who think that because they're big and they've got leverage, what they're going to do is they're going to set up identical production environments, and let's say both Amazon and Azure, and we're going to either play them against one another or work. We're going to run our workloads over in Amazon when they're cheaper and Azure when they're cheaper, and we're going to do that, and we're going to shift those workloads around by the hour. Thank God that we're not seeing a lot of that talk anymore, because it's ludicrous.
I think one of the premise of that point that was being discussed, like you said, lately, is that you can somehow make every single application workload ubiquitously mobile, and that's really not the case. Even if the front end portions of your applications are mobile, you have a distributed microservices based application, you still have other factors involved, right? You have data, for one, which is harder to move across really quickly. And if you do decide that I'm going to park it somewhere, then that's a cost factor. There are other things that you have to understand with your applications. Are they dependent, or are they integrated with something else which is running elsewhere? And that has some not only cost, but cost factors, but even API management if you're connecting dynamically to other services. So those kind of things come into play. So this whole notion of I can write completely an application which is completely mobile and I can move it on demand anywhere is harder to achieve than on paper, right?
It's what's really cool is it's technologically possible to make that work. It's practically impossible from from an actual execution and management perspective. It's somewhat practically impossible.
Yeah,
and then sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Trey.
No, and then I was thinking that it's actually better. So when we talk with our clients and they have data centers that they want to sort of vacate or partially vacate and move to cloud or adopt cloud for certain things, we go through a complete planning exercise and have an exit strategy for that data center. So, and when we do those things, we find that a lot of clients haven't thought about their application portfolios and what those dependency maps are, or integration points are, or what will affect them with so-called anti-patterns in that movement to the cloud. Well, if you decide to do that strategy and planning sessions, and then you are in a certain cloud, AWS as an example, and you have those plans and exit strategies, you can move it to another cloud with a little bit of effort, but not instantaneously. And it still may work for your workloads, right? So it's a combination of, am I planned for my application? Do I understand the overall portfolio and landscape? And what is it that I'm actually accomplishing if I move somewhere else? So I think about those kind of things when I talk to people.
I think that's a definite gold nugget of this conversation, right? Because we kind of approached it from multi-cloud, but the real angle is, regardless of what you're doing from a cloud or multi-cloud strategy, is that you should always be thinking about, kind of like your business continuity plan for other things, but your exit strategy from the cloud. It's something you should contemplate before you have to, right?
Yeah. And those strategies are real plans of, where am I going to park my data? How do I get it out? I mean, how much data do I have? What does my application look like? Do I have API management? Can I connect to something else? Do I have network topologies that is defined? And more importantly, do I have the operations and governance and security in place? And then we haven't even touched upon skill requirements to manage more complex environments. So there's a lot to strategize and create a plan for. And unless you're absolutely sure that this is the direction you want to go and pick a cloud. For example, I always, when I talk to people, I always think, if you have a specific use case or an application workload that just works better somewhere, but it's also clearly not real-time integrated with something else in your application portfolio, then it's a clear case. You should be thinking about moving it elsewhere, which gives you the most benefit. But if you can't identify those kind of things, then why are we doing it? That's a very core question that I would like to find out.
The concept that Sri sort of dives into here, right? This planning for the exit or planning for the end at the beginning, there's a whole lot of irony packed in it that I love, because if you're doing that upfront planning, again, that the plan for the exit, right, before you start, what ends up happening is, first off, is you end up consuming services a lot more efficiently and taking advantage of features and functionality judiciously and very well, and which ultimately lowers the overall cost of doing business this way, right? Which then makes it less likely you're going to have to execute your exit strategy. And frankly, not having to pay for something twice, once to put it up and wants to remove it and put it somewhere else, is the best cost saver of all. So there's a bit of irony there. Planning for the exit means you're less likely to have to use that later on, at least in our experience with our customers. Time and time again, we see this when they've done the upfront planning and they know how they would pull that ripcord and get out. They're unlikely to use it. They tend to love it, right? They tend to they like the decision they've made better, and they're a lot more confident in their decisions, and they're far more brave when it comes to choosing the next cloud service provider for the next workload. They're a lot more confident.
I love it when we talk about that. That's a great concept. Thanks, Pete. But the thing that we always run into when we're talking to somebody is when we talk about things like what you just said, beginning with the end in mind and that exit strategy and then work back from that, that's making an assumption that it was clean to begin with, right? I mean, oftentimes we're kind of building the runway while we're fixing the airplane that's currently on fire kind of thing. What do we suggest? What's a good approach? And I think Sri kind of mentioned it, or one of you mentioned it earlier, is what's the approach if we've already got some stuff going on? And, what kind of advice would you give to folks out there that already have some stuff going on? The points that you've both made are fantastic. How do we kind of back into some of that stuff?
How do you retrofit? Is that the question? Or how do you retrofit your strategy to the decisions you've already made? Is that kind of what your question is?
Yeah. What are some steps that people should take related to that?
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Sri.
No, I was going to say that the first and foremost is always, and we mentioned this word a lot, but strategy is understanding your application portfolio, right? You have to understand what is it that you have today? How does it work in the overall ecosystem? What have you done an analysis of? Can you even benefit from moving certain workloads into any cloud, leave alone multi-cloud? And then once you have figured those out, then you have a plan of action to say, okay, these are applications that I would like to consider further. The next steps would be to understand, we mentioned dependencies, but dependencies could be logical dependencies within your applications. It could be infrastructural dependencies. It could be external dependencies. You may have dependencies with your vendor who's providing that software. You could have interdependencies between data movement. Now, if you've understood all those things, then you have a little bit better hybrid platform strategy in terms of, placement and what do I have. Then
can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just said some stuff that seems pretty fundamental. Understanding the workloads, their dependencies. Do folks not have that stuff sorted out? Do we often encounter folks?
No. I say no. And I say it like
I knew the answer to the question. I was just teeing it up.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
No, but please go. Talk about it.
Yeah. Who was it that said never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to? Probably a movie character somewhere, a book character. But I say that so quickly and jump on that so fast because one of the more common conversations that I've had in the last, I'd say 6 months, maybe a little longer, but certainly in the last 6 months, the application rationalization as a topic of conversation has semi-dominated my day-to-day existence. There's a bunch of that's been going on. And where does that come from, right? You don't need to perform an application rationalization if you already have all this stuff under control. If you already know what the dependencies are, what the platform needs are, technical APIs, et cetera. I mean, our customers have a lot of different problems that they're facing, but they all come to a fundamental, the same fundamental thread. I don't know what I got. I don't know how it works together. And that's not saying that IT shops are dumb by any stretch of the imagination or that they don't know anything. But the things have blown up in the last few years, and there's a lot more out there than any human being could be expected to keep up with. So they're trying to get a new handle on things to reset their strategy, and a lot of the first steps people take starts with application rationalization. So as soon as that comes up, I already kind of know what some of the symptoms are under the covers that we're going to be looking at, and what some of the challenges might be. So no, they don't. And it's pretty typical. It's not, like I said,
wanted folks. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want folks out there to recognize, I think we go into a lot of places and talk to people and they feel like, oh, we know we're so far behind everybody else. And that's not necessarily the case in this. I think there's this giant, like you said, people are they're operating, right? They're doing it. They're going to market. They're doing it, as well as they can while there's potentially a cultural transformation going on in the organization, whatever. But I think every now and then you're chopping down trees as hard as you can in the forest. You got to climb up and make sure you're in the right forest, to steal something from a Covey book, right? That's an important aspect. And then to be able to figure that out. And then that goes back into what Sri was talking about. Those are the first couple of steps. If you want to finish the step process you were talking about, Sri.
Yeah. So, part of that rationalization also shows you a couple of interesting things, and it may not be just application related, right? What is your current strategy to say, do operations around those things, right? Is infrastructure tied to the applications, or are you more infrastructure aware, or is the application agnostic, right? Can it run anywhere? And then a lot of customers think about, oh, I need to identify which applications and workloads can be or require transformation to a cloud native manner of delivering it so that it works better if you move it. There's a lot of analysis that needs to be done, in my opinion, to really figure that out. Right? Are you typically one of the things that does need rationalization and constantly is that monoliths are built in an organic way. You just keep building upon an application, and people add features or functions, and then they lose track of what's what the application architecture looks like a few months later. So that's why it's a constant effort too. But then once you decide, you have a handle on your application portfolio and workload placement and what does the workload characteristic look like, which ones require more effort, or maybe they're core services that you would like to move to the cloud, but you need to modernize or cloud nativize. Then you have to think about how did you manage those applications, from an operational, from a security, from even a network integration perspective. And then finally, you still have the whole concept of, do I have the skills to manage this complete change that you're going towards or thinking about? So it's the benefit overweigh the challenges that you might be facing. And then finally, you have to build an operations model to go with this transformation plan. So step by step, all those things have to be addressed. Go ahead.
So let me throw the next question grenade in here. So it sounds like there's a lot of things crossing over into different areas of the organization. Whose job is this?
So in my opinion, every transformation obviously requires an organizational change management, and it has to be sponsored by, CIO level.
C-level, C-level folks,
yeah,
right?
So you have to do the C-level buy-in, otherwise culture change is very unlikely to happen.
Well, what I'm experiencing, I'm pretty sure you guys would agree, and for the most part, is when we do go in to talk to anybody about any portion of this, we're usually not talking to the C-level guys first. If we're doing our job right, we eventually start talking to those guys because we try to corral it all together. What do you guys have to say? What would we say to folks who are in a portion of this responsible, maybe the infrastructure, maybe the development side, maybe maybe the C-level guys? What tips will we give to folks listening on how to, what's the catalyst for this thing?
Catalyst for the change itself, or how do you actually?
How would they go about? Yeah, there you go. How would we successfully do this? What's a good starting point? What's some advice?
I think, like I said, it needs to start with a program, that is a OCM program, right? So you need to assign several aspects of this change. The first starts with, what is the expectation what are the success criteria? Why are we doing this, right? We need to track those with real metrics so that we understand that we've actually achieved those goals. The second is there has to be a skills program that not only allows existing people to upskill themselves to manage things in the new environment, but augment it. The third thing that typically needs to be done is, as they say in the whole DevOps pipeline process as well, this culture, there's measurement, there's sharing, right? You need to have a culture of different groups coming together and share their processes and become cross-functional. And then all those things have to be measured, like I said, over a period of time so that you understand the change is successful.
Nice. I want to hammer a little bit on what Sri had said there in the middle step around the skills, upskilling, and making the opportunity for people in IT to evolve, into roles as they change, because the roles are going to change, right, over time, skills needed and so forth. And I say this with a little dismay that IT seems to be one of the, well, maybe not the only industry, but one of the verticals that where personnel can sometimes be seen as fungible in an organization, and it breaks me a little bit when, well, we're not going to need that technology anymore. We're going to hire a new guy to do this, and great. There's an advantage to hiring people with skills, certifications, and so forth to get deep fast, right? To accelerate transformation and change. But I'm not a big advocate of wholesale replacing staff, because that's silly, because there's so much organizational sort of tribal knowledge that we lose. We're going to re-platform an entire application, and that person or people who were responsible for it before probably should still have a lot of say in the new world order, right? When we re-platform a thing, whether it's on-prem to cloud or cloud to cloud and so forth. So I don't like to see dismissal of people or replacement. I like to see people evolve. I mean, IT's full of smart people. I mean, we live to learn new things and implement them. So this is one area I would say carries the most danger, right? The temptation to treat people as fungible resources and discard them when you should in fact be doing exactly what Sri said. It's those opportunities for upskilling, new skilling, re-platforming the people's brains is a much more advantageous, because then you don't lose that historical, that tribal knowledge that's so critical for future.
And at the same time, you have to counterbalance your strategies that we've been talking about for the last few minutes. There are challenges when you introduce too many changes at the same time, or very quickly, or without real purpose and direction, right? So then if you just, in this context, adopt multi-clouds because there's some pressure in doing so, or not a clear strategy, then you also have to upskill your people to multiple technologies, which may not be necessary if you really thought through the strategy part, right? So it's a combination of the two. You have to upskill people anyways, but you do it with the strategy so that you're very clear as to where you're going with it.
I like, just about every conversation that we have, regardless of where it started, usually ends up with something along the lines of some transformational effort that's going to happen within your organization. It's going to take leadership as well as the technology aspects, and it's going to take a strategic, focus on what we're trying to accomplish, as well as the operational aspects that have to go down, the whole know thyself, know your workloads, know the dependencies and those types of things. I think
the people process tools concept is still alive, and very much so, because you have to first figure out your people part. You have to understand, can you re-architect your processes? Sometimes you may even need to re-architect your business process to meet the success criteria of a transformation. And only then you figure out what your tool chains have to be and platforms have to be, and does it meet the overall objectives of the bigger benefit that you're looking at.
Agreed. Pete, any parting words for us?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to the very beginning and say, the future of multi-cloud. The future of multi-cloud is more.
More. There's going to be multi-cloud.
Yeah, there will be. I don't think that there's, and I would be sort of harkening back to that first segment. I don't think there's so much of a choice, right? I think I don't remember which of you had said it, but you're going to wake up someday and without even realizing it, oh crud, we're multi-cloud. We didn't even try. I think that's just going to happen. But more.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Again, and for the folks out there, programmatic approach. It's going to take not only the leadership within the different areas of the business. It's going to take that leadership from the top down, a programmatic approach, and then again, leveraging the folks that you've got on the truck for their tribal knowledge and their understanding of the business and the relationships that they have therein, and utilizing those external folks when you need to be able to get you across the finish line or get you set up in that build and transfer kind of model. Pete and Sri, you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation today. If you'd like some more information related to the types of things we do at Insight CDCT, please visit us at insightcdct.com. Thank you and have a fantastic day. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.